Surveys are located outside of the venue on a table, along with some other promotions for some recent NUPI publications, which I will also go into detail now. But first, good afternoon again, and welcome to today's seminar, Envisaging China's Future, How Will Xi Jinping Navigate His Second Term, featuring Toshiya Tsugami of Tsugami Workshop Limited in Tokyo, Japan. My name is Renjani Lindgren, and I am a research fellow here at NUPI working on issues related to international security in East Asia, and it's my great pleasure to be chairing today's seminar. Today's seminar is part of NUPI's Modern Asia Seminar Series. We have had a sequence of seminars in this series over the past couple of years, and I'm happy to announce that we will also have another seminar in this series tomorrow. It's rare that we have two Asia-related seminar series in a row, but tomorrow we will be discussing the US and North Korea with some of our in-house experts. Same room, only the time's different. It's a little bit later in the day, 3:15, and it will feature collaboration with the Nordic Institute of Asian Studies out of Copenhagen, featuring Geir Helgesen, the director there, and also Asia Network, the Norwegian Network for Asian Studies. So I hope that some of you who are interested can look at our webpage about that upcoming seminar as well. It's Cyber Monday, so in keeping in good Cyber Monday tradition, I thought I would also promote a recent book that we have published here at NUPI, which is now on super discount today. I think it's 50% off. This is a book called China and Nordic Diplomacy, and it features some of NUPI and Norway and the Nordics' leading scholars talking about China's relationships with the different Nordic countries. 5 chapters on that, as well as a chapter on the Belt Road Initiative, and also a chapter on the 5+1 model that is being modeled after the 16+1 model on how the Nordics can engage more closely with China. So if you're interested in this book, it's also outside along with the flyers, along with the survey outside of the room. You can get the discount code and learn a little bit more there. Probably first I should have mentioned that we're all on YouTube right now, and will be, for the rest of the seminar. So this seminar is being live streamed and will be accessible afterwards on YouTube as well. And also, I would like to mention that the seminar will last about an hour and a half. We will begin with a presentation from Tsugami-sensei. That will be followed by comments from my colleague Bjørnar Sverdrup-Tigesen, and then we will open the floor for good question and answer and discussion. There will also be a session for journalists. I know there are quite a few journalists in the room interested in interviewing Tsugami-sensei and Bjørnar after the meeting, and that will also take place here in the same room following the seminar. So, without any further ado, I would like to introduce our speaker, Toshiya Tsugami. Mr. Tsugami is president of Tsugami Workshop Limited, an independent China business consulting firm based in Tokyo, Japan. He is a graduate of the prestigious University of Tokyo Law School, and he also served in Japan's Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry, also known as METI, and in that role he was an observant of China's WTO negotiations, the entry negotiations. He has also been an economic counselor at the Japanese Embassy in Beijing and METI's director for Northeast Asian Affairs. He has written 6 books to date, with his first book, China's Rise, winning the Sun Tree Prize for Social Sciences and Humanities in 2003. And his latest book, A Trade War, examining the US-China relationship, was published in 2017. Today, he will provide us with a detailed analysis of recent developments in the Chinese economy and what this means for the region, and also the Chinese leadership, a very timely topic, perhaps always a timely topic in these days, but especially since Xi Jinping has just entered his 2nd year of power following the Party Congress just last month. We've been looking very much forward to this seminar here, and we have had a great interest, I have to say, from the audience, so it's so great to see that so many of you could make it here today. And with that, I would like to welcome Tsugami-sensei to NUPI and to offer the floor to you.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure for me to make such a presentation in front of distinguished guests, and I really thank NUPI, the Institute, to have me here. Today I will talk about 4 points, and because I major in economics, so the former 2 topics are for the economies, and there are a good news and a bad news about Chinese economy. The good news is that Chinese new economy is growing very fast and in a very good shape. And the bad news is that its old economy is really in trouble with an over debt or over supply capacity or something. Particularly in order to keep all the economy afloat, Chinese government needs to increase their investment and debt, and that is the biggest problem for China today, to have that big accumulation of debt. I will explain to you later. And the third topic is based on such observations for Chinese economy. I will also like to talk about politics, whether President Xi Jinping's power is really strengthened or not, in what way. And lastly, as a 4th point, I will talk about a bit about how to live together with the economic giant China. So these are the contents of today's presentations. So let me start. In year 2008, the global economy has experienced a so-called Lehman Brothers shock. And in order to counter the negative impact, Chinese government has started so-called 4 trillion renminbi's economic stimulus, mainly by way of investment. And in addition, China also started an unprecedented monetary easing, which is shown with this graph. Money supply per GDP ratio. It will jump up to around 8, and nowadays it exceeds 2. This is a very big magnitude of monetary easing. And with these 4 trillions and monetary easing, Chinese investment, so-called fixed asset investment, which include production capacity enlargement in the manufacturing sector, and real estate investment, and public infrastructure construction by government. All in all, there is an official statistics of fixed asset investment every year. In the year 2008, it was 15 trillion renminbi. And after the start of 4 trillion, it jumped at around 24, 30, 37, 44, 50, 55, and last year around 60 trillion. So if you gather up the amount from year 2009 and to last year, the accumulated amount is already 320 trillion renminbi, which is equal to around 41 trillion euro. And I believe this number will surpass 400 trillion in the next half of in the first half of next year. It's an unbelievable amount. So it is quite natural that in the course, China has experienced a very rapid economic development. And also, China has provided a great amount of gift to the rest of the world. But the problem is, this way is not sustainable. It cannot last forever. Too much money was borrowed and poured into a non-performing asset. This is the biggest cause of today's Chinese difficulty. Investment in the manufacturing sector has brought about a tremendous amount of over capacity, and real estate problem. It is not quite serious as foreigners think, but in small and rural areas, there's really many ghost towns there. And maybe the most serious situation underlies in the local government infrastructure investment. Too much amount of money are poured into an infrastructure project, which actually don't make major economic impact, positive impact on the economy. So I quite doubt that if those money poured into those non-performing investment can have enough ability to pay back those debt. And Chinese government really understand the problem. From the beginning of Xi Jinping's in the first term, his administration clearly understood that problem and tried to change the course from investment-led, debt-led growth model to so-called supply-side economic reform-driven growth model. And in the year of 2014 and 15, it worked. No further investment accelerators. So it started to work, but in return, all the economy has suffered serious glut. You can see this bar graph is an official growth rate, GDP growth rate quarterly, and these there are other indicators which I think are somewhat honest and reflect the reality. Electronic consumption and railroad cargo are the contents of so-called Li-Kuchang index. So it clearly shows that in the year 2014 and 15, the economy has continued to slip. This is a price for such a correct, right, new normal reform. You need to pay some price, but starting from last year, there was a clear rebound, particularly in old sector. New economy is in a good shape, has long been in a good shape, and old economy, which used to be facing a very serious glut, also started to rebound. So today, Chinese economy is in a very good shape. And in a real GDP growth term, it's now the speed of growth is 6.8 to 6.9% a year. But very few people look at the nominal growth rate. In nominal GDP growth term, in the first half of this year, it exceeded 11%. Chinese economy is now and has a $12 trillion of magnitude, and this giant entity has recorded in a nominal term more than 11% of growth. Today, world economy is relatively in a good shape, and the share market everywhere is in a very high status. But I think one of the most apparent cause of such an economic boom, I think it's thanks to locomotive China. But the opposite is also true. If Chinese economy slows down, then the rest of the world, world economy will also slow down, maybe more rapidly than in China. So now we are enjoying the Chinese locomotive functions, but if the problem is that it cannot last forever, then we need to prepare for that. But this is a real problem. And when new normal, Xi Jinping administration's original economic policy worked, it slipped down. But then starting from last year, the rebound was caused by government-led investment. I was very much puzzled. Have you already abandoned that investment-driven policy? But again, they put an investment accelerator. It doesn't make sense to me. And IMF, the fund, monetary fund, has long been worried about the Chinese rapidly growing debt problem. And in last year's Article 4 consultation report, they made an unusual warning to Chinese government. If you downgrade the growth prospect or growth target that you committed some 5 years ago, then Chinese economy may face a hard landing in near future. And they advised to downgrade the economic growth as such. But with this less than 6% of growth, if China follows this advice, then China will not be able to reach the target of doubling the GDP in the year 2020. This year's report of IMF gave up this advice. If this is because IMF thinks that we have underestimated China's growth potential, it's okay. But then the reason why they give up to make an advice is because they think even if we argue, China wouldn't listen. Okay? But they still think maintaining such a high growth target is a bad idea. And the price of such an policy comes in the form of very high, very big government deficit. If China follows the last year's advice, then the level of government deficit of China will gradually decrease. But with today's policy, it will even above 12% of GDP. This is not a joking number. Every year, China has produced new more than 20% of GDP of government deficit. And if you add up government deficit, government debt, and corporate debt and household debt, these three debts all in together, the magnitude per GDP would reach to around 300% in year 2022, when the Xi Jinping's second term is over. 300% is also another joking number. But there is I hate to say good news, but there is an exception. Japan's number is already 380. So it seems that there is still room for China. But the real difficulties for Chinese government finance comes after year 2030, when due to the demographic structure, China's pension liability will explode. But even before that difficult days, if Chinese entire debt level has already reached 300%. How can you continue to pay pensions for people? President Xi Jinping has declared on the renewed Chinese dream in the latest Party Congress. And he reiterated the target of the year 2035 and around the middle of this century. But I really doubt if China continues this trajectory, such a glorious future will not come. The more you do this, the more you sacrifice the future. The reason why IMF warns as such is because looking back in past economic history of the world, such a rapid increase in such a rapid increase of this ratio will be followed by hard landing. This occurs because too much money is borrowed and poured into an investment that cannot make cash. So as a result, debt redemption is very slow, and the number of the amount of accumulated debt will soar. And if interest rate is high, then there will also be a snowballing effect. And more newly borrowed money are allocated to refinance of the existing debt. This is a textbook case of Ponzi scheme. So that's why IMF warned it is quite dangerous. But I have a slightly different view on that. It's an honor that Japan is also listed as a past failure, example of past failure. But if you look at Japan's trajectory, I don't think this is a hard landing. This is a gradual landing or soft landing. The reason why is Japan has made a tremendous amount of public work construction after the bubble burst. And thus, Japan had successfully maintained social stability, economic stability. But the price for such a policy was a soaring government deficit. So looking at today's Chinese economic situations, it makes me feel that if China is following Japan's past trajectory, Chinese people have tremendous amount of times have said that China needs to needs to study Japan's lessons. They wouldn't say Japan's past failure, but they always say that they want to study Japan's past experience. But my question is, what did you study? I really want to follow Japan's past trajectory and sacrifice the future of yours? This is my question. The number has already more than 380%. And if you look at the household debt and the corporate debt is not actually increasing, but government deficit is soaring. In the past, this is due to an expansion of public construction. And nowadays, it is due to an increase in pension liability or something, medical care and so on. So not every country can do this. There are some conditions necessary for doing such a policy. One, capital exporting country which don't need borrow money overseas. This is a very important condition. Second, debts are substantially concentrated onto the central government finance, which is most resilient as opposed to the corporate. And in Japan's case, Japan has maintained almost 0% interest rate for around 2 decades. This would not make any snowball effect. As this as an exception, China also has these two conditions. And so there is a reason to believe that China can follow Japan's past trajectory, regardless of whether it is a good idea or a bad idea. Recently, a Chinese scholar who is now teaching in Fudan University wrote very excellent works, China's Guaranteed Bubble. This book argues that the reason why Chinese bubble has yet burst is because there is a powerful government's implicit guarantees around everywhere. But as a result of such an implicit guarantees, people recklessly take more risks because they firmly believe that even if they make a loss, government can save us. So they become much more and more reckless. And for example, people invest in real estate, not because they are very confident about real estate market future, but because putting money on real estate is most safe, the safest way under such an economic untransparent economic situation. Because local government would not let their real estate market to collapse. They will make every effort to block such a sharp fall of real estate price. That's why, even if there is, in a worst case, you need to be ready for some 10 or 20% of loss, but not anymore. So under very strained economic conditions, maybe putting money onto real estate is the safest way to keep your money. But it works in China. It is reasonable in China, but from the rest of the world, this is nothing but a distortion of economy by the government. I sometimes make a comparison between a human body, investment bubble. This can be compared to having a rotten food, and you will soon be faced with vomiting or diarrhea or something. But from a different angle, although these are very tough, but from different angle, this is a normal reaction of my body to put toxic matter out of your body. But China takes very strong medicine to block such a vomiting or diarrhea. It's good that you don't face these things, but in return, you still keep those toxins in your body. And what is worse is you are still eating. So in the long run, continue to avoid such a bubble or burst. Maybe it's not a good idea. Sooner or later, you need to put those toxic matters out of your body. Otherwise, your health will continue to be sacrificed. Continue to suffer. This is a story about renminbi devaluation and so-called capital outflow. But due to time constraints, I need to stress one point. The situation here is totally different from Asian financial crisis some 2 decades ago. at that time, foreign investors have suddenly pulled their money out of Thailand, Indonesia, and those countries' economy has collapsed. But in China today, it is Chinese people or Chinese companies who pulled the money out of renminbi and convert this money into a foreign denominated asset. So China has experienced $1 trillion of decrease in their foreign reserve. But at the same time, privately owned foreign denominated asset will increase more than 1 trillion. So this is a movement from, in a sense, from government to private sectors. So the situation is totally different. So I don't think China will collapse due to this monetary outflow or something. But it surely reflects Chinese people's anxiety. Maybe renminbi exchange rate will be much cheaper than today. So it is the best way to keep your asset is to look for any ways to convert your renminbi denominated asset to a foreign denominated one. But in recent days, 1 or 2 years, Chinese capital control has been strengthened very much. So you need to say farewell to renminbi internationalizations. The situation is already back to 10 years ago. Otherwise, China cannot keep renminbi stability. Without such a capital control, more and more Chinese people will bring their money out of your country. So it is also necessary to keep the global economic stability. Please keep stability. And party congress is over. So everybody is interested in what will be the future trend. Last weekend, there was a sudden fall in Chinese share market. At the time, I was in London and asked by CNBC people to make a comment in their broadcasting. I'm not quite sure. If you look at the PMI index, there is not still any clear sign of downfall. Let's see. This is a bond yield, which is actually the interest rate, long interest rate. It is continued to rise. Maybe it is the Xi Jinping government intention to keep control on the monetary expansion. Maybe all the economy will again face difficulties, but in a more gradual manner. Then I move on to the brighter side, good story side. I summarized this bright aspect into an IEB. I is an IT technology, E is EV, electronic vehicle, and B is big science. New economy in the IT industry is really in a good shape. Particularly mobile phone-based apps in which fintech, sharing economy, or scoring system, GPS, and so on are integrated into that. Such apps provide very cost-efficient and small business-friendly business platform. It is really unbelievable that China's small startup companies are given very democratic and friendly business platform in which they can operate very in a cost-effective manner. For example, these using QR code. This QR code payment, this service is very cost-effective. You are collected only 0.1% or even free charge. But most credit card business in the Western world still collect 3 or 5% of charge. With or without 3 or 5% of your total sales, what does this mean? You can clearly understand. It will enlarge the extent that you can make business. And there's no need for advertisement if you get high score, right? And what is funny is in the two-way rating systems, taxi app. And this is also the case for Uber, but taxi apps, passengers rate drivers, but driver also rate passengers. So nasty passengers, if they want to look for a taxi, why I cannot make I can do because your rating is that low. No driver can respond. So with such systems, Chinese economy is growing in a very good shape. Sorry to say, I hate to say, but in these areas, China has completely surpassed Japan's, much advanced than Japan. This is today's reality, and in some cases, I believe Chinese this business is even advanced than the United States. Small-scale society is a society that everybody knows each other. So there is a very low transaction cost or transaction risk, right? But due to the size is small, there are very few business opportunity. Mass-scale society is the opposite. There are many business opportunity, but dealing with stranger is too dangerous. So there's such a kind of trade-off. That was the past. But with very effective scoring systems, maybe there is a chance to overcome such an asymmetric information problem. For example, Alibaba has started online microfinancing services. And suppose a farmer wants to borrow a small amount of money to buy feed or fertilizer. If he applies, then in a good, if in situations is fit, he will immediately receive that money in his account, because the decision is made by AI, artificial intelligence. Is it safe to do so? No problem, because they have every business transaction record. His sales to customers are all through Alibaba's B2C site, and his purchase is all through Alibaba's B2B site. So every transaction record and how his the sales goes, and so on, so on, so on. Every data is in the database of Alibaba. So there's actually no no significant business risks. This is thanks to the width and the depth of database. In establishing such a powerful big data database, I think Chinese companies have already surpassed the US counterpart like Google or Amazon. By doing so, maybe the future economy will be changed due to this. Pick and choose. many business models and many business opportunities can be chased with very low transaction risk because your database is sufficiently large. Of course, not 0%, but in a very low risk, it can be possible. And there are also very excellent companies like Huawei or DJI, a drone manufacturer whose world share is 70%. And recently I heard a very interesting word, digital Leninism. One-party rule powered by digital technology. It's quite funny, but then it's also somewhat scary. With these things, or this Alibaba's new service is a scoring system of to what extent you are creditworthy. First, starting from the financial transaction record, and more database are gathered, and if you have a bad record in being sued by others, or if you have made trouble in police or something, those records are gathered more and more. And today, even government has participated in such a program. So if you are, the first score is 950, and if you are a high ranker, over 700 or so, then you will be given so many benefits. No need to put a deposit when you stay at hotel, but not limited to such an economic staff. You can go through a specialized security lane at the airport if you are a high ranker, and the Singapore government can give you a visa without any qualifications if you are a high ranker. So more and more benefits are given to such a high ranker. And the opposite is also true. If your rate is very low, maybe it's very difficult for you to have a good job, or if you want to marry a female, her father would make a strong opposition if you are a low ranker, and so on and so on. So this incentive system or disincentive system may change this society, Chinese society. And if these systems are gathered with an official one, I'm not sure whether this will be the future of humankind. It makes us remind the 1984 by George Orwell. It's a very I'm very much scared with this aspect, but maybe there are huge benefits and very safe and cost-effective, and so on and so on. So with that substantial, with that big benefits, maybe future people will tend to lean in such a digital world. I'm not sure, but such an experiment has already started, not in any part of China or the world, but in China. This is very, very incredible things. And EV, China has a very big ambitions to be the world leader of leading EV industries. Man-made market may work. And big science. Chinese R&D expenditure is also grow rapidly, and there is a science citation. A good science literature are quoted many times by other scientists, right? So this is statistics about the top 10 scientific literature which are quoted very highly. And in some areas like computer science, mathematics, or chemistries, China's these literature's share has already surpassed the United States. And the most successful big science we can see China's air or astronautics industries. China will soon send a human to moon, and there's also a space. How to say this? Space lab or something. Only by China, not an international corporations. Wow. So all in all, not all is bad for Chinese economy. There is a brighter side and there is a dark side, both. So let me go on to the third point, political aspect. I think there are very contrasting situations. On one hand, in the area of foreign relations or defense or national security, I really feel that China, Xi Jinping's power has been strengthened. But in economic policy, I don't think his power is that strengthened. Quite contrasting, I think. The reason why I argue that in foreign relations Xi Jinping's power has been strengthened is because in the first term, Xi Jinping has successfully shot down 2 uniform bosses, right? As an anti-corruption campaign. And in addition, Xi Jinping has strengthened his control over PLA. And with this strong control, he also started an overwhelming PLA reform, which previous leaders couldn't do anything. And with this strong control over PLA, which is the hardliners camp, I think Xi Jinping has enlarged the room for less assertive foreign policy. This is quite opposite to the mainstream view, but I think in South China Sea issues, after being defeated by court rulings in Hague, Chinese policy has dramatically changed. Today's policy is we can solve this problem peacefully, friendly among the claimants countries. So please don't touch third parties countries. Please don't touch this issue. This is today's policy. But in order to be much nicer to Philippines, Xi Jinping has promised that China will not make further reclamations in Scarborough Shoal. This should have been kept secret, but the Philippine foreign minister talked this to press people and immediately be sacked. Such a commitment could not be done if Xi Jinping doesn't have a strong control over PLA. Hardliners people will definitely make oppositions or do other things that would risk his face. So this is a sign that Xi Jinping's power has been strengthened. Same applies to North Korea. People don't understand why China is so soft to North Korea. There is an enigma, but I argue that this is a problem of the memory of war dead in Korean War. 200 or even 500,000 of soldiers were dead in Peninsula when the Korean War was caught. And some of them are still alive at the age of 90s, around 90s. And if they listen some ill speaking of North Korea, they are very much angry. Are you saying that my dead friends are all died for nothing? So this has formed a very strong taboo on North Korean issue. And previously, no leaders can challenge such a taboo. But then Xi Jinping, on this issue, he is a revisionist. He tried to change these narratives, traditional narratives. Although any concrete outcome has yet emerged, but then under the table, a big change is being made. Recently, Chinese foreign experts started to argue that China needs to cooperate with the United States. China needs to prepare the collapse of current North Korean regime or something. It is 100% contrary to the original traditional narratives. The reason why these experts can say so is they think Xi Jinping is behind us. So previously, China can cooperate with the United States and attack North Korea jointly. It is 100% impossible, unimaginable thing. But from now on, we shouldn't deny 100% the possibility. In a situation where there's no other way out, maybe China will resort to the last resort. This is also something that you cannot do without strong control over PLA. So in this sense, we can observe some strengthened power aspect. But talking about the economic policy, in the first term, I would say economic policy in his first term is simply was a Dutch roll. This is an investment-led, high growth-oriented factions, and this isn't a reform-oriented factions. And if you trace the trajectory of Xi Jinping's administration's economic policy, started from so-called economics. At the time, Li Keqiang was in charge of such an economic policy, but he left nothing, no result. And 1 year after, Xi Jinping, he himself will be in charge, was in charge with a new slogan of new normal, no further investment-driven economic growth. But in year 2014 and 15, it worked, as I told you. But there was a reverse in last year. And the reason why there was such a reverse or a rebound, I think there were two incidents in year 2015. One is in June, stock bubble bursted. And the other one is in August of 2015, there was a renminbi devaluation incident. And before and after these two incidents, world view on Chinese economy had totally changed. Before that, everybody is wow. And after that, everybody is worried. Are you okay? Really okay? Such a dramatic change has made Chinese top leaders very much worried about their reputations. And it has something to do with the rebirth. This is my reading. But this is a total denial of new normal. And in his second term, he need to restart his trial for reform, supply-side reform-led economic growth. But from the worsening situations. So from this, I argue that Xi Jinping's power is not that strengthened in economic policy. So after the party congress, some argue that he will definitely make 3 terms or even lifelong president or something, but I don't think so. Much depends on how things goes in his second term. It's still an open question. Lastly, let me talk about how to live together with China. I have several concerns. It is really a good thing that the rest of the world have been given that economic gift from China's growth. Thank you for China. But on the other hand, there are some concerns. Today, let me take 2 issues. One is the Korean company Lotte. This company was bullied severely recently. And the other one is there is a port in Sri Lanka named Hambantota. This has something to do with an aid loan. Xi Jinping, he advocates free trade. Protecting free trade is very important. I really appreciate his commitment because there is different types of leaders in the United States. But I think with these things, his commitment is the value of his commitment is decreased. Korean Lotte, this company was bullied, faced with a boycott in China because this company has transferred their land to U.S. ballistic missile system THAAD, which China strongly opposes. Boycott has long been a tradition of China. When China was very weak before the war, there's only one measure for Chinese people to express their protest or something. But today China is not weak. Number 2 in size and the maybe most powerful government economically. So boycott by such a country, I think, is a coercion under the meaning of international law. Force others to obey your insistence. I don't think this is in line with international law. And I also think that it has a problem with multilateral trade spirit. Market access, which Lotte used to join and used to be given, this is not a reward by emperor to his subordinate. This is a mutually committed market access. This market access should not be revoked unilaterally because this is doing so is not in line with a mutual commitment. from now on, whenever China recourses to such an economic coercion, the rest of the world need to say, this is now no good, in one voice, because China wouldn't listen to a country's criticism, but they tend to listen to the international voices. So we need to tell China that such a boycotting today is no longer appropriate. Hanban is here, and the future of this port, particularly if it is used militarily, it has something to do with the national security of relevant countries. It seems that from 10 years ago, China has started to give loans to Sri Lanka, and Sri Lanka cannot pay back these loans. And in order to protect their claim, China was given 99 years of lease of that port. I don't think it's a good idea to choose the number of 99 years. But anyhow, it has triggered national security concerns by relevant neighbors. I think as a creditor, China also needs to protect their claim. It's true, but maybe the origin of this problem is that China has given the inadequate loan, which Sri Lanka government can actually cannot repay. So, although this is not easy, but I think from now on, the international society needs to establish a new forum on which we can monitor every country's loan aid given or something, including China. Originally or traditionally, this was the responsibility of OECD, but China wouldn't join the OECD because they think that is a developed countries club. So if OECD cannot work, then we need to establish a new forum. And if there is any problem economically, maybe the recipient country cannot repay, then we need to make such a peer review of such an individual country's loan activities. That is also necessary. And if there is a problem, we also need to voice, in one voice, to China. One Belt, One Road. This is a great success of international public relations. Maybe we can say triumph. But I always think that there is a huge gap between the image that we have and reality. Most of us think that Belt and Road has started in year 2013. This is not the case. It has already nearly 2 decades of record. And everybody talks about AIIB or Silk Road Fund that was established for the sake of Belt and Road Initiative. But they are not major actor. Major actor of Belt and Road are not AIIB nor Silk Road Fund, but are State Development Bank or China's Exim Bank. If you compare those giant national banks, AIIB or Silk Road Fund, they are only a kid with only 100 or so staff. And there are also a big gap between what they are doing now and what we heard 3 years ago. 3 years ago, we heard a great plan to construct a trans-Eurasian continent high-speed railroad network, and with this, China's over capacity will be transferred to those countries and so on. Can we see this today? Disappeared. Today's Belt and Road has become much more realistic and, in a sense, much more prudent. And those illusionary programs has already disappeared. And this change was occurred because there is a growing public anger against such huge images. Chinese taxpayers are very much angry about that and officials are wasting our money. Those money poured in such a trans-Eurasian continent high-speed would never come back again, would never be repaid. This is simply non-performing programs. Their anger is very substantial, so government officials need to be very much careful about such public unrest. So they need to be much more cautious and careful about giving loans. I think this is a good thing in order to be more sustainable. Otherwise, China's Belt and Road will be over in a decade. So with regard to One Belt and One Road, we need to be much more realistic, and we need to see the real image of China's One Belt and One Road. Maybe it is not that big as we